He is the fashion world's reigning superpower.
Whatever aspect of the business that you're in our industry, everybody looks at Ralph Lauren as the model.
A dream maker who netted billions by imagining what others wished for.
Every time I design clothes, I am making a movie.
I don't think anybody since Walt Disney has been as successful in persuading millions and millions of people to buy into his fantasies.
Wherever you go, Ralph Lauren's brands project an aura of rarefied living.
Ralph's brand stands for classic, timeless fashion.
The brand represents your souvenir of this fabulous lifestyle that you want to be a part of.
But his life was not as picture perfect.
My sense was he thought that would be the last time he walked the runway.
It wasn't. Not by a long shot.
We used to joke that he always had the plan to take over the world. He's taken over the world, there's no doubt about it.
Ralph Lauren is the most famous one-man brand on the planet. A brand that is synonymous with a superior lifestyle.
Ralph always knew that he wouldn't win if he didn't take risks. And he's always pushing the envelope.
He keeps himself awake at night. He's worried that he's going to fail.
He's obsessed. He's brilliant, he's irascible, he's difficult, and he can also be kind and interesting and sweet. He's a huge bundle of contradictions.
Lauren insists that the images he creates communicate his story and did not participate in this show. Before he was Ralph Lauren, he was Ralph Lifshitz, the youngest of 4 children who wore his brother's hand-me-downs. Born in 1939 to Jewish immigrant working-class parents, he grew up in the Bronx, New York. His father was a house painter and amateur artist.
Living with someone for whom aesthetics mattered would, of course, affect a child in that household.
Michael Gross is the author of Genuine Authentic, the real life of Ralph Lauren.
He went to yeshiva, and he wore a yarmulke, and he wore all the other paraphernalia of Orthodox Jews every single day. He told me that at the very beginning, when he was living in the Bronx, he would go and escape to the movie theater and literally fall into the fantasies of the movies of that era, which was really, one of the great movie-going eras, the late 40s and early 50s.
Warren Hellstein is one of Lauren's boyhood friends.
We all, as kids, looked at the movie screens and the actors and how good they looked. I know Ralph particularly liked Fred Astaire.
And he truly did project himself into the scenes in which men like Gary Cooper and Cary Grant were playing. He sees the characters that populate his dreams and his visions. And that vision, that ability to step into a fantasy world, Ralph brought to the fashion business.
In one of his only 2 major television interviews ever, Lauren told Charlie Rose back in 1993 about the enduring impact of those experiences.
I was very influenced by movies. I was very influenced by a world that had a sense of dream, that had a sense of something else. And what I was influenced in these places was the good guy, the Hopalong Cassidy, not the corny guy, but there was the man on the white horse. My sense was I had an integrity inside me about what I believed in. I did it honestly, but I had a point of view. I was very strong.
Warren Hellstein says that when they were teenagers, Lauren asked Hellstein's father, a tailor, to make him one of his first suits.
But I remember going down to my father's place with him, and it was very difficult. Just said to my father, Dad, do whatever he likes. He says, I can't please him. I said, okay, that's it.
Even though he was a perfectionist, Lauren was a guy's guy.
He liked basketball best, I would say. It was okay. We were all good.
How are you?
In 2011, when Oprah Winfrey came to interview him on his Colorado ranch, Lauren shared his earliest ambitions.
Did you always want to be a cowboy?
I wanted to be a baseball player. I wanted to be a basketball player. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a dancer. Actually, I wanted to be Batman. If that's a secret I'm telling you and everyone out there.
When he was in his late teens, he and his brother Jerry opted for a name change.
As Ralph said to me, the problem with the name Lifshitz is it had the word in it. And he endured endless teasing that continued through school, I'm sure, into the Army. I believe that Ralph suggested to me that the name Lauren came from Lauren Bacall, who, was a great style icon as well as a great actress.
Following high school, Lauren worked as a salesman while taking business classes at night. He never got a degree. In 1964, after a short stint in the Army, 26-year-old Lauren married Ricky Lobeer, a receptionist he met at a doctor's office.
He married the girl who would look perfect in the convertible with her blonde hair flowing. Ricky became his model, his backstop. Ricky was always, I think, in the back of his mind.
Still looking for his place in the world, Lauren set his sights on New York's fashion industry. He became a salesman for Brooks Brothers, and then a series of necktie manufacturers.
I took him to his first polo match at Blindbrook, where we were exposed to fabulous things. The silver, the leather, the horses, the tall, slinky blondes, big hats, and just a high society that we really weren't knowledgeable of. But certainly, it didn't take us a moment to appreciate it.
That fabulous world transformed Lauren's vision.
He called me up and said he was going to open up his own business. And what was my opinion about the name? And he said he had it down to Players or Polo. And I said, Ralph, Polo is totally elitist. Hardly anybody knows anything about it. But everybody plays something. So there's no choice. It's got to be Players. He said, okay, thanks a lot. Goodbye. And then the rest is history.
It was the era of plain, narrow ties when Lauren offered up a radical design concept: colorful, wide ties. Striking out on his own, one of his first stops, Bloomingdale's. Marvin Traub was the former CEO and president of Bloomingdale's. Shortly before he died, he spoke about the brash young designer.
He showed them to the Bloomingdale tie buyer, who said, I like them, I'll buy them, but I don't want that Ralph Lauren label on it. I want a Bloomingdale label. Now here's Ralph starting and struggling in business, about to get an order from Bloomingdale's. He closed his sample case and said, I will not accept the order without my name.
Several months after Ralph Lauren walked away from an offer at Bloomingdale's, the renowned store called him back.
I thought the ties were terrific, and if he wanted his name on it, that was fine, because I felt the ties would sell.
And they did. Other well-known names in men's clothing also wanted in, including Paul Stewart and Neiman Marcus. Within a year, Lauren sold a whopping $500,000 of ties. The designer had designs on something even bigger: to expand his brand. He aimed to do so, he told Charlie Rose, by envisioning clothing that he himself would want to wear.
What you thought you can buy in England, what you thought Cary Grant was wearing and Fred Astaire, you could not walk into a store and buy. When I came along, the business was not at all like the things that I made. You could not buy. You couldn't find it.
Bloomingdale's saw potential and profit in Lauren's line.
We worked closely from the ties to men's shirts to suits, sport coats, slacks, the total men's collection. And then he came and said, Marvin, I'd like to do a women's business.
I think the most important break for Ralph Lauren was probably getting a boutique of his own in Bloomingdale's. It was the moment when someone outside of Ralph's fantasy existence agreed with him and brought him into the world of commerce.
This was the first time that Bloomingdale's had given a designer his own in-store boutique.
And the business grew very rapidly. Ralph, as in everything else, knew exactly what he wanted in the shop, what he wanted on the floors, what he wanted on the walls. It created really a Ralph Lauren environment.
And it's all Ralph's dream.
Menswear designer John Varvatos was a protege of Lauren's.
If you go back into the 60s and 70s, people put things on a mannequin. They never told stories. Ralph took you into a fantasy world. Ralph took you to an island. He took you to the Hamptons. He took you to the West.
3 years after his first ties went on sale, Lauren won the Oscar of the fashion industry, the 1970 Coty Award for his menswear line. And in 1971, Lauren bought the first of what would be many luxury cars. Pulitzer Prize architecture and design critic Paul Goldberger has reported on Ralph Lauren's famous car collection.
I think it was a Mercedes convertible that he couldn't quite afford at that point. He bought anyway because he understands that very kind of aspirational reach that he's trying to sell to other people.
He reached back to his earlier fantasy, that polo match, and introduced his signature emblem, the polo player. But despite strong sales, the company found itself in financial trouble. To keep it going, Lauren was forced to invest most of his personal savings, $100,000. He also hired a new business partner, retail executive Peter Strom, who pitched in and bought 10% of the business for $6,000.
I think he was very worried. They were delivering everything late. Their distribution pattern was all wrong. We solved those problems, and we got the right stores to buy the right amount of things, to display everything properly.
2 years after Strom's arrival and back on track, Lauren's brand got a boost when his men's clothes were cast in The Great Gatsby.
His ability to create clothes that looked like costumes, that looked like clothes, that looked like costumes, was unequaled in American fashion.
Hi. Hi.
But I actually think that the claim that he designed Annie Hall was more important.
The Annie Hall look would inspire one of Lauren's earliest women's collections, and the designer himself was often the featured model in his brand's ad campaigns. Commercial director Jeff Madoff has shot many of Ralph Lauren's fashion shows.
He wears this stuff, so he's become the embodiment of what he creates. Like Frank Perdue with his chickens, Ralph in his clothes, there was an authenticity to it.
The company launched a blitz of new collections, including a wide-ranging home collection. Lauren also licensed his name to other products, trading a measure of control for capital. Now flush with cash, in 1986, Ralph Lauren went all in, spending $30 million to open a standalone flagship store housed in New York City's historic Rhinelander mansion.
My wife and I were there opening day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, and the store was packed with people. I said, Ralph, how are you doing? He said, I think I'm doing all right. And I said, Ralph, you're a retailer. You can ring off the cash register now. And the manager came back and said, we have $41,000 in. And Ralph said, is that good? And I said, that's very good. Then I went back to my office, and the phone rings about 5:30, and it's Ralph. Marvin, we have $101,000 in. How is that? And I said it was terrific. This was Ralph learning to be a retailer.
I think it told his story to the world. Anybody who came to New York, it's like on the tour guide of New York, You understand Ralph Lauren's message very clearly when you go through there. When you walk by those windows, you get it.
As the business continued to grow, Lauren pushed his employees harder than ever.
There's a vast team of designers and creative executives. They do the designing. They do just about everything, but they bring it to Ralph, and finally, it's Ralph who decides. And there are actually this amazing thing, little tiny stickers that get put up on idea boards, and they say, RL likes. And in that act, Ralph Lauren takes possession of those clothes, of those designs, and deserves the credit.
Ralph pays more attention to detail than anybody I've ever met in my life. And when he is designing and he's looking at the clothes, he'll look and want a lapel ever so much more peaked or ever so much narrower, or he likes the plaid but he wants it to be bigger.
In 1986, the estimated worth of the privately held company was $600 million, and Lauren, not his models, was the cover shot. It would seem that life couldn't get any better for Lauren when he launched his next women's collection. But behind the scenes, something very alarming was shaking up the famed designer.
We were at the top of the St. Regis Hotel, and the finale of the show, Ralph came out, and I saw his face unlike I had seen it before. And I saw he was fighting back tears. I started crying, because there was something going on. I didn't even know what it was. It was just visceral.
No one but those closest to him knew that Lauren had been diagnosed with a brain tumor.
It was one of those things that you just didn't want to believe. Couldn't happen to Ralph. What did it mean for the future? There was all those questions at the time.
As I was riding home in the taxi, and I heard on the news reports that designer Ralph Lauren was being admitted for emergency brain surgery. Wow.
Oh, yeah, my God. Sure I worried. I felt so bad for him, you know.
Fortunately, the tumor was benign. After surgery, there was a long road ahead and new priorities.
Oh, I don't think he worried about what would happen to the business. I think he worried about living, about his life.
Lawrence shared his ordeal with Charlie Rose.
I remember when I came home from the hospital, and I took a walk in Central Park, and I was very weak. And I saw some guys running in the park, running and sweating. I said to myself, I want to do that.
Several weeks later, Lorne returned to work.
I think he came back even more aggressive than ever. But I think he was a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more laid back, and maybe was valuing every moment a little bit more.
He launched a fitness wear collection and created a top-selling perfume. He spent millions promoting these lines and the product universe surrounding them. James Fallon, editor of Women's Wear Daily, calls Ralph Lauren a powerhouse in the magazine world.
Because he's one of the biggest advertisers out there. If I launch my fragrance and I take an ad out or a series of ads, you're going to then do a profile of me. I mean, look at the number of magazines that did put him on the cover when he had his 40th anniversary, and that reflects the extent to which they appreciated his financial support in past years.
Appreciated and also depended on it.
A $200 million annual advertising budget is an 800-pound gorilla. Ralph Lauren sits wherever he wants, and if that's the cover of your magazine, Ralph's going to be there.
Lauren's dominance was also evident when Audrey Hepburn presented him with the Council of American Fashion Designers Lifetime Achievement Award.
There was one of his muses, his icons, Audrey Hepburn, the woman that he watched when he was a little kid in the movies, now handing him this statue that for him could have been the Oscar.
Remember the princess? I got her.
With the launch of Lauren's upscale Purple label in 1994, the company looked great to the untrained eye. After all, sales were at an all-time high. But that only told half the story. Heatha Prabhakar is a retail business journalist.
Like every retailer that has big dreams, it just grew too quickly. There was a lot of capital expended in order to make that brand where he wanted to be. That combined with a very lackluster operations in terms of distribution created really a perfect storm for a company that was almost on the brink of bankruptcy.
Lauren needed a lifeline and found it with Goldman Sachs. The investment firm purchased 28% of Polo Ralph Lauren for $135 million.
That was surprising to us because we never realized that he had been that close to the, back to the wall financially. And I think that's sort of what led to the Goldman Sachs investment.
They're very good about identifying where the growth is and what's going to be a company that's going to have long-term growth. And that's exactly what they saw in Ralph Lauren.
And the infusion of cash meant exponential growth, with Polo Ralph Lauren opening new stores and overhauling older ones. By 1997, Ralph Lauren was the top-selling designer in the world. Consumers spent almost $5 billion a year on his products. Goldman Sachs saw greater potential and pressed Lauren to go public. He wasn't so sure.
He always had concerns that once it was a public company, he would have less freedom of action, that it was no longer his own brand because he had shareholders and a board to deal with.
Despite his initial reservations, Ralph Lauren decided to take his company public in June 1997. Liz Dunn, a retail analyst at Macquarie Capital, has been tracking Lauren's company for years.
Part of the challenge with going public is that investors want to see growth quarter to quarter, year to year in a very consistent, linear fashion. And so I think in the early days of the company's history as a public company, they sort of struggled with that.
When he first went public, we would cover his annual meetings, and he would stand in front of his shareholders going, Wall Street doesn't understand me. Our shares are just sitting there. They don't really move. I wish they would get what we do.
Lauren was now working to satisfy his shareholders. The company began to sell in more stores, but sales growth slowed and profit margins declined. and 16 months after its opening day high of $33 a share, it fell below $17.
I know that it tormented him. We talked about it. He talked about it. He was frustrated that Wall Street couldn't see what was abundantly clear to him and always had been since 1967, that he was it, that he was the guy. It drove him crazy. And it was into that environment that came a man named Roger Farah, who was one of the great retail executives in America.
Roger Farah came over and really restructured the unsexy parts of the business, supply chain, operations. One thing he also did too was that he bought back those licenses. He brought those brands back in-house and made sure that all those brands were underneath the Ralph Lauren umbrella.
They're going through a tremendous growth period. And I had suggested that we put together something that really codify the Polo brand message. And we called it Ralph Lauren Philosophy.
It's a brand video that Lauren commissioned.
The way I do collections, what inspires me is a story or a theme that gets to me that says, I know how to build this. I don't build a collection from a sleeve or from a specific fabric. I build it out of a dream.
Control to him is very important. And this was a way to present a unified message where he didn't have to be there, but it was like he was there.
Lauren continued to expand. With an eye on international sales, he opened flagship stores in Milan, Tokyo, and even Moscow.
America is represented in France by McDonald's and Ralph Lauren. I mean, you know, which one makes our culture look better? In Paris, I think the Ralph Lauren store, it's really become a kind of symbolic American embassy.
But in the summer of 2012, the all-American designer was attacked when news reports revealed that the Team USA uniforms Lauren designed were not made in the USA.
Made in China. This is China. China!
I think they should take all the uniforms, put them in a big pile, and burn them.
The company said the uniforms for the 2014 Winter Games would be produced in the United States. Throughout his career, Ralph Lauren has carefully cultivated his own image. He has homes on Fifth Avenue, in Jamaica, Long Island, and Bedford, New York, as well as a 17,000-acre ranch in Colorado, where he spends time with his wife and 3 grown children. He also spends time and lots of money on his pet passion.
Cars are fun and toys, and they all offer you a different experience. To me, they're works of art.
This 2010 promotional video announces a Paris exhibit of some of Lauren's 60-plus vintage cars.
He once told me his car collection is something he does first because he just loves cars and responds to them, and he doesn't collect art, unlike most people in his income bracket. He said, you know, you can't drive a painting, and he loves the idea of being able to take any of his cars and drive it around on a Sunday afternoon, say.
Paul Goldberger says that Lauren has changed some of the car's original colors.
He sort of looks at something and says, this is wonderful and exciting and beautiful, but it actually could be even better, and I want to make it even more perfect.
For 40 years, Ralph Lauren's pursuit of perfection has kept him firmly in charge as CEO and chairman of the board of the company that wears his name.
I think that small symbol of the polo pony is enduring, and it's something that customers over a long period of time have chosen. This is probably the best long-term story in my coverage because there are these variety of growth opportunities that are really driving a doubling or more of sales over the next several years.
The former tie salesman at age 72 is one of the world's wealthiest people, worth $7.5 billion.
I think that the last piece of Ralph Lifshitz that remains in Ralph Lauren is a kernel of insecurity. And it is the fuel that runs the engine, that runs the person who personifies the brand.
Ralph doesn't sit on his laurels for 1 minute. Not for 1 minute. I mean, you can enjoy the moment, but you have to understand that you have to keep things going, and you can't be a one-trick pony. Speaking of ponies.